Okay, let's go then to our special guest. Joining me now is Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister Sharon Haskell joins me from Tel Aviv. Appreciate your joining us, Ms. Haskell. Are we to now be optimistic that we have a ceasefire in place, if not a durable peace? From what Donald Trump is saying, it's a done deal. Do you also believe it's a done deal? Hostages will be released and Israel has agreed to stop the bombings in Gaza.
Well, we sure hope so. When Donald Trump put the peace plan on the table, Israel said yes. The Arab world said yes. Turkey, Qatar, Jordan, even the Palestinian Authority said yes. Unfortunately, the reply of Hamas said that we had to continue some negotiation. In the last 2 years, in the last 2 days, Hamas has agreed to the first stage of that peace plan of Trump, not entirely, but at least the first step. That gives us a lot of hope. We try to contain our excitement because we've been dealing with this terrorist organization before. We've been disappointed before. And so we are very hopeful that in the next few hours after our government cabinets, we'll have a discussion about the in-depth detail that were discussed in the last few days. We will be able to agree on this first stage of the peace process.
Is the entire Israeli cabinet behind the peace plan? Your right-wing allies in this coalition government are reportedly unhappy with it. Is the entire Israeli government behind Benjamin Netanyahu?
Yes, we do back Prime Minister Netanyahu, but it's important also to understand that this is a very difficult time. In return for the hostages, we have to release hundreds of terrorists who were convicted with some of the most horrendous crimes you can ever imagine. Those people, those monsters have blood on their hands who killed innocent children and women and men. And they will need to be released back into society with no restrictions at all, including people who took part of the 7th of October massacre, the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. And this is very difficult for the Israeli society as well. There's an in-depth discussion. The family of those victims who were murdered by those monsters have a very difficult time. And so with that joy and excitement, we also have many difficulty and a lot of sadness that we are dealing with. It's not that simple.
But you have agreed to it. Am I correct that you have agreed to withdraw behind an agreed line, that there will be no further bombings in Gaza? Are we clear about that, at least in this first phase?
So the first phase and the ceasefire have actually gone into place. Now it needs to be signed. The hostages that Hamas abducted from their beds and have been torturing them in the last 2 years needs to be returned. And those terrorist monsters who were convicted with those crimes, unfortunately, will be released also back into society. Then we will start a discussion about the second phase, as Hamas hasn't accepted it, as the Arab world and Israel have already said yes. And so there will be more negotiations and more talks about the second stage of this deal. Hopefully, we'll be able to create peace and stability, because this is what Israel always wanted. This is what Israel wanted from the start.
I'll come back to that in just a moment, but Hamas has just said, Ms. Haskell, that it is seeking international guarantees that Israel will not resume bombing Gaza after the group releases all the remaining hostages. So are you all willing to give a complete guarantee that once the hostages are released, there will be no resumption of the bombings of Gaza, which have killed thousands of innocent civilians?
Look, I think you truly need to understand. Every time Israel had a diplomatic path that will achieve our goals, and the goals are very clear from the start, the return of the hostages and dismantling Hamas. Every time we had a diplomatic path, we chose the diplomatic path, even making huge concessions. We don't want war. We always wanted peace and stability. Unfortunately, Hamas, time after time, have declined it. Hamas is a terrorist organization that doesn't want peace and stability. It's prescribed in its charter the complete annihilation of the state of Israel, killing all the Jews in Israel and out. And that's why the Arab countries, the Palestinian Authority, everybody has agreed that Hamas doesn't have a future role in the Palestinian life or governance or military. It's very much accepted, understanding that this is a terrorist organization that only seeks for death and destruction, not just for Israelis, but for Palestinians as well. As long as we'll be able to, and we are very hopeful and hope that we'll be able to continue into the second stage.
No, but are you giving that guarantee, ma'am? Are you making a distinction between Hamas and the Palestinian people? Just as you say, Israelis have suffered, the Palestinians are turning around and saying 66,000 civilians have died. Many are suffering from malnutrition. Are you giving a guarantee, ma'am, that once the hostages are released, there will be no further bombings or there will be no siege of Gaza?
Look, this would mean that there is a ceasefire into place. It means that Hamas will need to accept what the Arab world and what the Palestinians have accepted, which is the second phase. It means right now that if Hamas would have accepted the deal, it means a long-lasting peace and stability, maybe a beginning of a path as the plan of Trump that speaks about economical prosperity and a different education of a population that's been indoctrinated by Hamas to terror. It was very easy to recruit terrorists of Hamas from a population that's been indoctrinated for years by a terrorist organization. If we want a path to peace, which is what the Arab countries understand and the Palestinian Authority understand, and there are guarantees by those countries and by the Americans as well, then Hamas has to agree to the terms of the peace plan of Trump.
But given what I'm hearing from you, there is a huge trust deficit. The Israeli government doesn't trust Hamas and whether Hamas will fully disarm. They in turn do not trust whether you will actually abide by what they claim is the first phase and ensure that there will be no further bombings. This huge trust deficit, how is that going to overcome? Is this therefore only a temporary peace or will it be a durable peace?
Look, this was very clear. Every time there was a ceasefire, every time Israel has signed any kind of document or agreement, Israel fulfilled and committed and obliged by everything that we've signed on. Unfortunately, we've seen it is Hamas, a terrorist organization, it is Hezbollah in Lebanon that actually did not commit and did not fulfill the commitment they signed on. Okay? And so you don't need to ask us whether we will fulfill the agreement we sign on. We've already proven that Israel fulfilled and committed and obliged by what we sign on. It is Hamas, the terrorist organization that time after time broke ceasefire agreement and broke what it actually signed on. Let me tell you an example. 10 years ago, during the operation of Protective Edge, Israel and Hamas signed an agreement backed by the international community for a ceasefire after another round of war. 4 hours after that ceasefire was signed, Hamas has went out of its tunnels, murdered Israeli troops, abducted 2 soldiers into the dungeons of torture, and have been holding them for 10 years now. Okay, so if you're asking me about who's actually violating time after time a ceasefire, how come Israel did not receive the guaranteed it was promised? And those hostages for 10 years are being held in Hamas captivity. This question you have to ask Hamas, because Israel proved time after time that we have always committed and always fulfilled the agreements we sign on.
Ms. Haskell, how much credit are you giving Donald Trump for what has happened? Because Mr. Trump seems to be taking all the credit. There are also reports that Mr. Trump talked tough to Benjamin Netanyahu, saying, you can't run the world, Bibi, and that he has drawn a red line even with Israel. Do you give Donald Trump the full credit for this peace plan if it is executed?
Look, there isn't a better friend to Israel than President Trump. And he's proven that time after time. If it wasn't for the military pressure Hamas put on Hezbollah and the massive diplomatic and bilateral pressure that Donald Trump put on Hezbollah and on Lebanon, you wouldn't have seen a ceasefire there. It's the same with Iran. It's the same with the last ceasefire of Hamas. The fact is that Hamas has agreed to every ceasefire until now for two reasons. One is the military pressure, and the other one is Trump's identification of who the aggressor is and put enough pressure on Hamas to actually accept the deal. Look, it's been very difficult. And I know in many cases, President Trump have brokered and negotiated many deals, including India and Pakistan, including the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, including now with Ukraine and Russia. The fact is that, on a contrast to the international community, the United Nations and other, he's not concentrating on a process. He's concentrating on the result. And the fact is that Trump's putting pressure on Hamas brought those results of peace and stability until now. And I really hope that in the next few hours, we will witness another one.
Do you believe that, therefore, Donald Trump deserves a Nobel Peace Prize? There's been much talk that Donald Trump himself wants the Nobel Peace Prize. The announcement will come this weekend, hours possibly before or after the hostages are released. Do you believe that Donald Trump, therefore, deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, as some or certainly the Trump supporters are arguing now?
Oh, he certainly does. After what he's done in Africa, in the Middle East, negotiating for the first time between the Ukraine and Russia, after what he's done between India and Pakistan as well. Since he came into office and even a little bit before, he actually created more peace and more stability than anyone before. I think if they don't give Trump the Nobel Prize, this institution is truly going to become a serious joke, speaking about politics more than about what people actually has done to create more stability, more prosperity, and more peace in the world.
My final question, ma'am. Many believe that a durable peace can only come if there is a two-state solution, a recognition of the Palestinian state. We've seen in recent weeks more and more countries across the world, including former Israel or present Israel allies, are recognizing Palestine. Do you accept that a two-state solution is needed, not an international stabilization force, which can only be transitional, as Donald Trump envisages, to govern Gaza? Eventually, you need a two-state solution of a Palestinian state and an Israeli state side by side.
Well, you couldn't be more wrong than that. And the fact is that you've seen that when those declaration of a Palestinian state during the last negotiation came up, it only emboldened Hamas's position. They understood that the longer they continue with the war, the longer they continue the suffering of Israelis and Palestinians alike, the more they will be rewarded by the international community. The fact is that President Trump's plan has nothing to do with a Palestinian state. And that is a proof that it doesn't have to come through that. On the contrary, it will come when we stop this complete obsession about the slogan of a two-state solution and concentrate on what really matters, how to make Israelis and Palestinians live side by side, how we should concentrate on education, on the economy, on living side by side. That's the most important thing in order to create real peace, because the fact is that Gaza was
so who's going to govern Gaza, ma'am?
Solution, and it's completely failed.
So if that's the case, who's going?
Well,
So who's going to govern
President
Gaza
Trump
then, ma'am? Who's going to govern Gaza?
Yeah. So President Trump pretty much outlined what his vision should be, and Israel have agreed to it. The Arab countries have agreed to it. There should be a technocratic government led by Tony Blair and President Trump in order to rehabilitate and to create a society that is willing and wants to live beside the Israeli society. I think that concentrating on what are the actual measures that we need to concentrate on now instead of a slogan or an obsession is so much more important. And this is something that I have to say. The Arab world accepted, Qatar accepted, Turkey accepted, even the Palestinian Authority have accepted.
But what happens to the right to self-determination then of the Palestinian people? Surely that has place. I spoke to the Palestinian ambassador to India the other day, and he said that Israel has committed war crimes, genocide against us, and therefore he wants action against Benjamin Netanyahu
Look,
and the government in Israel. There is anger among Palestinians as well. And
well,
therefore,
it's a no.
do you at least appreciate the Palestinian position at all?
Look, this is a complete load of lies that have been spread. Do you truly think that if there was a genocide committed, not a single Muslim country would accept refugees from Gaza? I'm certain that if that would be a reality or a truth, they would actually open their doors. So if the Arab countries don't believe those lies, certainly not Western society. If the intention of Israel was really like that, why would we facilitate aid into Gaza? Why would we campaign an operation with hundreds of thousands of polio vaccines to vaccinate Palestinian children to keep their safety? I mean, it completely contradicts those
So are you
absurd
telling me
claims.
the
So
images?
hold
Are
on.
you telling me the
So hold
images
on.
of the? Are you telling me the images the world has seen, ma'am, on screen are fake images? We've seen malnourished Palestinian children. Out of the
Excuse me,
66,000
sir.
dead, 75%
Look,
are believed to be women and children. You surely cannot be obvious, not recognize that reality.
oh my God, look, if you want to try and picture the world, a war with no casualties, with rainbows and unicorns, it doesn't exist. Our reality is that a war is a horrible scene. A war is a horrible sight. Yes, there are casualties. That's the reality of a war, whether it is in Ukraine, whether it is in Israel, and whether it is in Congo. Okay. Now, I cannot picture that nicely. We didn't want that war. The Hamas have declared a war on Israel with the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Any sensible country, any country who would want to defend its citizen would conduct the exact same thing. What would happen if Pakistan would attack and murder, if I need to compare between the countries and the population, tens of thousands of Indian and murder them in a single day and abduct thousands of people and torture them every day? Would the government of India stand still and do nothing to defend its country, its people, or to return its hostages? I mean, this is something that every country would do for its citizen. Is it pretty? No. But every Israeli wished it was the 6th of October. Every Israeli wished that Hamas would never open this
In
war. And I have to say one more thing. After the 7th of October massacre, it took us
yes.
3 weeks to set our operation to enter Gaza. During this time, we told Hamas, if you bring back our hostages and if you dismantle, there won't be a single Israeli soldier in Gaza. They declined. They declined time after time any suggestion, any proposition that was. And so I'm sorry, the responsibility for the destruction lies on the hands of Hamas and Hamas only.
In conclusion, therefore, ma'am, if this plan does go through, does Benjamin Netanyahu get strengthened or does he get weakened? Because there are, as I said, coalition partners who are not fully supportive of this peace plan. Does he? 70% of Israelis want the hostages released at all costs. You said there's been pressure on Hamas, but there's been pressure on Netanyahu as well. So does he get stronger or weaker as a result of this peace plan, ma'am?
Look, as I told you, since day one, Israel has set those two goals of the war. The one is the return of the hostages, and the other one is to dismantle Hamas and arm Hamas. The fact is that if we are able to achieve Trump's peace plan, it means that we've achieved the goals of the war through a diplomatic path. Israel prefers that. And I think that Netanyahu, through that process, achieving the goals of the war, dismantling a lot of Iran's capability, whether it's Hezbollah or the Shia militias in Iraq, or what had happened in Syria, and Iran's directly, is putting it in a more strong position.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I appreciate Sharon Haskell, you taking the time off and giving us the position of the Israeli government and the people and
Thank
Israel
you.
there. Thank you so much for taking the time off and joining us here on
Thank
India
you.
Today.
And,
Thank you.
and it's just an opportunity. It's just an opportunity also to thank your government and your president and the people in India who have been praying and supporting the people of Israel. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you, Ms. Haskell, for joining us.